Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast, in which a long-time Agatha Christie collector and her Christie novice husband discuss the works of the Queen of Crime. This is a special episode where we are taking a look at the recently released Seven Dials mystery adaptation from Netflix.
Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast. We are your hosts.
Gillian Porter, a long-time Agatha Christie reader and collector.
And her husband, Alan Porter, who after almost 40 years of sharing a house with Agatha Christie books, has decided he should read them. As Jill said, this is a special drop-in episode, for want of a better word. Several people have asked us what we thought of the new Netflix Seven Dials mystery series. And we originally talked about the Seven Dials book and some of the other adaptations. And that episode was uploaded on November 9th, 2025. If you want to go back and look for it, see what we had to say about the Seven Dials originally. So let's move on to the Seven Dials Mystery TV event, which was released on Netflix on January 15th, 2026. And boy, do I have some things to say. This is going to be a long one. Strap in, folks. My initial reaction to this new three-part adaptation of Seven Dials, that it was long, and they were really dragging it out to fit into those 3 one-hour episodes. I actually said I was bored at one point, not just with the added scenes, but with lots of long, lingering shots when nothing actually happened. And while I'm talking about filmmaking decisions, what was with the overuse of the fisheye and wide-angle lenses that distorted the image? I mean, I sort of got the fisheye lens being used once to see the room from the point of view of the alarm clock, which was a bit esoteric, but I sort of got it. But the overuse of that and then the wide-angle lens, for me, it really caught me was the scene where they'd used it on the back of Bundle's car as she was chasing Inspector Battle, and then she pulled up outside Scotland Yard, and all the walls of Scotland Yard building were all at odd angles. I just don't understand why they did that. And also with the seeming obsession with the down the stairwell shots. The first time they did that at Chimneys, it's very cool. But to do it over and over again at both Chimneys and at the Abbey later, in both the big houses, it just seemed a bit obsessive. And also, talking of obsessive, all the close-ups of every single clock, face and watch, none of which actually helped tell the story. So I just didn't get that. It just felt like they were really padding it out to fill the time they'd been allotted. Also, the continuous close-ups on Bundle too. I actually felt sorry for the actress Mia Mackenzie Bruce, who didn't seem to know what expressions she was meant to be using at any given point in the story. And clearly nobody showed her how to use a period telephone. When she was talking on it, you only saw the earpiece, you never saw the mouthpiece, so it must have been, a long distance from her mouth, and she kept talking and moving her head. And those old phones, you needed that mouthpiece close to your mouth, and it certainly wouldn't pick up what you were saying if you kept sort of moving your head around. That would have been an easy fix. It just bugged me. All that aside, I will say it was beautifully lit and there were some outstanding locations, although Chimneys looked a little too grand for me, and the odd shot of buckets catching water from a leaky roof and the occasional shadow of a missing painting from the wall didn't really convince me that it was shabby, as it was described at one point, or that the family was short of funds to maintain it, which really was part of the whole point of the story. As for the story itself, with an adaptation of this scale and budget, you expect some changes and additions. Let's face it, a 3-hour prestige TV event is a different medium than a novel, so you have to make some changes to fit the way the story is being told. That's just part of the process. Fine with that. At least here, the general story beats were kept intact. I didn't have any problem with the additional scenes in Italy, as I felt they added actually a nice bit of backstory and gave the activities of the Seven Dials organization a larger, more international scope. The chase scene and the showdown on the train, however, were another matter. That seemed unnecessary, other than to set up the big reveal at the end that could have really happened anywhere. And I think it would have carried a lot more impact if it had actually happened at Chimneys, personally. And having Bundle as in a gun-toting standoff with Jimmy Thesiger just felt all sorts of wrong to me. And don't get me going on the cliche of having Bill Eversley being saved by the bullet bouncing off his pocket watch. I've seen way too many westerns and action movies where the hero is saved because the bullet bounces off a pocket watch or a cigarette case or the Bible or a notebook or something that's being foreshadowed that they've got inside their jacket. That just made me cringe. Anyway, which sort of brings me to the casting and characters. I have to start with the aforementioned Mia Mackenzie Bruce's Bundle. She just didn't convey the character as I see her, full of energy, a real go-getter. They talked about her being like that, but it was never really conveyed on screen. And you should show it, not just talk about it. I don't think it was helped by her young-looking features and her stature, which at times made her look more like a lost child than a plucky heroine. And it's difficult to see her as the focus of a scene when she's being towered over by everybody else. I'm sure she's a fine actress, but I felt this just wasn't the right part for her. And I'm afraid to say, for me, the same goes for Martin Freeman, an actor I generally enjoy. I don't feel he has the physical presence to be Battle as I see him. The way he was written and directed, he came over as a bit of a scatterbrain. And if that was meant to be a front and that he was putting it on, it didn't really come across. Sorry, Martin, but for me, in this role, you just didn't have the charisma or authority to head up not just a part of Scotland Yard, but an organisation like the Seven Dials. Just didn't work. I thought the rest of the cast were generally on point and fit their characters well. And I want to give particular shout-outs to Alex McQueen as George Lomax and the way he began to realise that he was becoming besotted with his bundle and his awkwardness at trying to propose. You almost had to feel sorry for the guy. I thought he did that brilliantly. Guy Siner as Treadwell, the brilliant butler, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Nyasha Hatendi as the inventor Dr. Cyril Mattit, especially in the scene where he embarrassed the English lords at dinner, talking about how during World War I, the fight extended into Africa and the Africans ended up killing other Africans just on the orders of white various colonial powers. This aspect of World War I is often overlooked, and it was good to hear it getting some airtime. Just on a personal note, just because one of my great uncles fought in Africa in World War I, unfortunately, as one of those white colonials, but it is a part of the conflict that doesn't get the attention it deserves. World War I was not just about the trenches in France, it was a world war, and that is often overlooked. So it was good to hear it mentioned here, and if it means somebody's going to go look it up and get a bit more educated about it, I'm all for that. And I think Jill wanted to say something about that scene too, so I'm going to let her have the mic for a few minutes.
I just wanted to say, as I didn't really think about this in my notes, I thought it was very powerfully done because all the white colonial type men around the table all managed to look uncomfortable at the same time. And I thought that was very clever because he spoke very quietly. It's not like he got angry and shouted. He just said it matter-of-factly, and they all kind of shifted in their seats. And I thought was brilliantly done because it didn't need like a dramatic reaction or anything. What it got was what it needed. And I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, it was very well done. And so unexpected too. You know, when he just said, yes, well, I fought for Germany in the war, and the faces all fell. And it's like, well, I didn't have a choice. My country was a German protectorate at that point. And now you've told us we're French. He made the points very well, and it was very well done. And as you said, the reactions were perfect. Talking of casting, and then there was Helena Bonham Carter as the gender-switched Lady Caterham. When the casting was announced, I could see how she might play the scatterbrained lord from the book, but she didn't. It was a very downbeat performance, so much so that at one point, while watching the show, I said to Jill, she's not being Helena Bonham Carter enough. And then there was the reveal that she was the one who organised the theft of the plans and engaged Jimmy Thesiger to steal them, and I thought, no. Then I slept on things, and I changed my mind. This wasn't the character from the book. This was a totally new interpretation of a woman suffering great loss, her husband and her son, and being placed in the intolerable position of inheriting a massive ancient family estate and being expected to maintain it with no income. With that in mind, I think the way she played things was spot on. The quiet rage, the not wanting to face the world that robbed her of what she held most precious, the hardening of her heart, and the opportunity, thanks to the gossip of men in power, to solve her financial problems. It actually made sense. It made a lot of sense. Bravo for that. It took me a while to get it, but once I got it, I really appreciated it. And I could see what they were going for. And the way she acted it was brilliant. All that was really just a way of me saying I found it overlong with a few bad casting choices, some strange direction and filmmaking decisions. But story-wise, I think it worked. And in retrospect, I think it was way more powerful than I originally thought it was. And I'm going to get off the mic now and actually give Jill a chance to talk about what she thought of the Seven Dials special.
Thank you very much. My turn. Okay, so you expect when a new Agatha Christie adaptation is announced that the author and director will want to make it theirs. They will want to emphasize some plot points or de-emphasize others, and more often than not, make bigger changes that take it too far from the source material. You wonder why they just didn't write their own script. Then you remember how much name recognition Agatha Christie has, and you understand why adapting her novels is so popular. Everyone wants to make something that is popular and makes money, right? Sadly, we all need money to survive. And one more point before I discuss the actual adaptation. Agatha Christie's books are funny. She uses humor very cleverly, yet a lot of the adaptations remove the humor. There were a few times during this show that made me smile or snort, but I felt there were many more from the book left out, which I think is a real shame. I don't think Agatha Christie is really acknowledged enough for her tongue-in-cheek humor, and I think that's a real shame. We were also trying to work out exactly how old Bundle was, which we found difficult. The drinking age was 18, so she could have been 18, but I felt Bundle was older than that in the book. She ran the house, she managed her father, she was trusted to go off to London on her own. I felt she had to at least be in her early 20s. And that was the impression I got from the book and the original adaptation that we saw. So I'm overly confused about that. I did enjoy this adaptation mostly. I really could have done without the many close-ups of Mia Mackenzie Bruce's face, who played Bundle. I know she's meant to be a really great actress and meant to have a big acting career in front of her, but I was very unimpressed as she only seemed to have a few looks and they just didn't really cover the number of emotions she should have been feeling, especially the part in the train with her mother. She really didn't look as devastated as you would expect. That may be down to direction. She may have not known what they wanted. She may have been trying to give it to them. It may be what the script had her doing. Not saying it's all down to the actress. I know there are many things that are involved in producing something like this, but to me, it just didn't work. She didn't look upset enough for me. The small voice, but you have me, Ma, I thought was very, very well done. But there were a few times where she looked merely bored rather than devastated. All the close-ups of her face also really slowed the story down too much when you really needed the pace to pick up. Well, I didn't mind the 3 hours. I didn't get bored like Helen did. There were a few points where you're kind of like, come on, let's get on with the story. But the only time I felt that Bundle was really engaged was at the end as she picked up the number 3 mask and agreed to join the Seven Dials Club, group, organization, whatever they called it. I couldn't remember. And I wasn't going back to watch it to find out. I also thought I was going to have some issues with having Lady Caterham played beautifully by a very understated Helena Bonham Carter instead of Lord Caterham, which was so superbly played by John Gielgud in the last adaptation. But it didn't in the end. She is such a great actress that it mostly worked. Like you, I thought adding the Italian bit up front and then I'm explaining that the guy that died there was Bundle's dad and Lady Caterham's husband, kind of pulled everything together and you kind of understood her attitude. She, like you said, she'd had two devastating losses, trying to run an estate with no money. I thought she played it remarkably well. The rest of the story pretty much followed the book. All the beats were there. There were still a few changes, but all the beats were there in general. I did like the line that Alfred had moved on to a new job as he liked to get paid when he met Bundle at the Seven Dials Club. I thought that was very clever. Showed how much Lady Caterham was struggling to keep chimneys up. As like Alan, I thought it looked too grand. The odd bare piece on the wall and buckets really didn't do it for me. The furniture looked comfortable, not shabby. All those down the stairs things, everything was shining and polished and looked well looked after. So you'd kind of assume they had the staff to do that unless they were doing it themselves. I disagree with Alan here because I thought Martin Freeman played a great Superintendent Battle. It was nice to see more of the character. And I loved it at the end that no one but him took their masks off at the Seven Dials meeting. We really didn't need to know who they were. It didn't matter to the story. And I was really happy that they took the love story out between Bundle and Bill Eversley, as I never really cared for that in the book anyway, because you know, it's one of those. And then they were happily ever after when at one point you didn't think Bundle even liked him. That I was happy with them taking out. I like them adding in that she was in love and coming close to an understanding with Jerry Wade. The way they looked at each other and they acted at the party made it look like they actually cared for each other, maybe loved each other. I thought that made it more interesting and more understandable why she really wanted to fight to find out what happened. I thought that was good. I thought Gary Siner played Treadwell beautifully. And I loved the whole, you don't thank the staff as it upsets them part between him and Lady Caterham. I thought that was funny. And Alex McQueen was also well cast as George Lomax. Wasn't quite as creepy as he is supposed to be in the book, but he made it work. And like you said, that part, as he got more and more besotted with Bundle, that was really quite funny. And I can't imagine what that must feel like when you're trying to propose to this young woman and she turns and jumps out the window when you're not on the ground floor. I thought that was quite funny. So they did that bit very well, I think. The part on the train, while well acted, seemed a bit too much action after very little in the previous episodes. And where was all that rushing off, that her here and there that she did in the book? There was always this, oh, I'm going up to London, Pa, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. She went to London once, she dashes off a couple of times, but not as many as in the book. But the train did serve to fill in the parts where Bundle finally works things out. And she only works it out because it's obvious at that point that Jimmy Thesiger and Lorraine are the baddies. She knows that and works it backwards, which is not really working it out in my mind anyway. And the scene with her mother, that was very well done, especially from Helena Bonham Carter's point of view, just being able to sit there quietly and exude all that despair that shows up in your living room while you're watching it on TV. I thought that was really very well done. Will I watch it again? Probably not, because it's 3 hours. If it was an hour or a 90-minute episode and I was fancying a bit of a watch, I might rewatch something like that. But a 3-hour commitment is very different, as we all know. Maybe if I was having a sofa day because I didn't feel well, maybe I'd rewatch it then. And the show was filmed mostly around where I grew up. So when we go back in February, I am looking forward to hunting down some of the locations. So that would be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. We need to do a bit of research first to find out exactly where they are. But because we didn't instantly recognize anywhere, but we do know it was filmed around that area that we'll be staying in.
I do feel I kind of recognized where they were when Bundle and Ronnie Devereaux were stood at.
Oh, like the colonnade thing where
the colonnade thing. I feel like I recognized that.
Okay.
That was the only one I felt like I almost recognized.
Looking forward to that. Looking forward to being back in the UK for a few weeks and looking forward to doing some location scouting while we're there. Before we leave you, we want to take the opportunity to remind you about our Patreon account where you can get early access to our podcasts. In fact, at the moment, we have podcasts lined up through March. So there's a good 4 or 5 episodes available on the Patreon account, which regular listeners won't get until a couple of months out. So this is your opportunity to get in there and give them an early listen. Our Patreon subscribers also get access to our Patreon exclusive Agatha Adjacent podcast series, which we currently have several episodes up. Patreon subscribers also get the opportunity to submit questions for our future bonus Q&A episodes. It's quick and easy to join our growing Patreon community, starting at the Greenway level for just $5 a month. Think about all that extra Agatha goodness just for the price of a cup of coffee or tea, whichever is your beverage of choice. And you can check it out and subscribe at patreon.com/Chronological Christie. Thanks for your support.
Please join us for our next regular episode where we will be discussing the murder at the Vicarage. We look forward to you joining us.
The music used in this episode was extracted from I'm Somebody Somebody Now by the Joe Venuti Orchestra and is a public domain recording. The Chronological Christie podcast is a production of Megrin Entertainment, a division of 4J's Group, LLC.